那说到底，当木头呢，他们机械的，机械的，那么我这边机械的嘛，木头的需要读心。
Today we will
嗯，对
continue with
呀，
the teachings on the 50 verses, the spring teachings.
好的。那么那个什么深度耶？
Now, can you all hear me?
好，那说，到底了呀？嗯，咋说嘞？呃，这里的机械的嘛，木头的需要用在了几个点下来啥呢？
Now, one
那
reason
嘞，
why we
马
need to
上
continue the spring teachings
这
is
唐不切为个里啊，那到你们看写起，
that originally
就写图要嘛嘞。
we were unable to do a few of the original scheduled teachings, and we'd like to make up for those. And the second is that I'd like to take this opportunity to actually complete the 50 verses, and I thought that this would be a good opportunity to do that. And so then next year we can then begin with a new topic, such as the Ocean of Samaya. We'll have the opportunity to begin new teaching. And so I think it's best for us to complete the teachings this year. So for these reasons, we have extended the duration of these teachings and added a few extra sessions. So today we are resuming, so I don't need to say a whole lot, but in general, when you think about the following a spiritual friend or following a guru, this is not just a Dharma thing, it's also in terms of the ways of the world. We also consider our teachers and our professors to be extremely important. And for us as well, following a spiritual friend or following a guru is very important. In particular, following a guru is extremely important in the secret mantra of Vajrayana. Now, the reason why this is so important is described by the eighth Karmapa in his text, the Prana and Mind Indivisible, at the beginning of this text. So he gives the particular reasons why following the guru is important. And I thought it'd be good to explain the main points that he teaches. Now, generally, in terms of the vehicle of the Shravakas, there were students who achieved results even though the teacher had not. For example, before Ananda achieved the state of Arhat, one of the students whom he taught, achieved the level of an Arhat, as is taught, right? And likewise, it's also to think about the Pratyeka Buddhas in their last existence are able to achieve the result without following a guru. This doesn't mean that they don't need to follow a guru at all. It means in previous lifetimes they follow a guru. But in their final existence, in their final lifetime, the last time that they're born in samsara, they do not need to follow a guru. They go to charnel grounds and other such places, and they examine how death occurs, and they meditate upon the 12 links of interdependence. This is as it's taught, right? So in terms of the Shravaka vehicles, you can, even if the guru has not achieved the ultimate result, there are students who have achieved results. And with the Pratyeka Buddhas, in their last existence, they can achieve this level of liberation, their result, even without following a guru. But in the secret mantra, you absolutely must have a guru who has higher realization than you. And if you don't follow a guru, there's no way to achieve a result. And the reason for this is that in the paths of the lower vehicles, in comparison to the higher vehicles, are not so difficult to realize. And the results, in comparison to the higher vehicles, are easier to accomplish. They're easier to gain. And so they're not for people who have the highest of fortunes. They're people who have somewhat lesser fortune. They're what these people of somewhat lesser fortune can practice. Similarly, Pacceka Buddhas in their last existence have the pride in their limited prajna, and because of the propulsion of because of the power of the previous habituation, because of the power of having trained in the path in previous existences, they're able to realize a certain degree of knowledge. But in the secret mantra Vajrayana, the presentation of cause, path, and Vrishna is extremely profound. And so you can't realize it through limited or partial prajna. You can't achieve it with the limited prajna of a Pacceka Buddha. And so this is the uncommon sphere of those who have the supreme fortune. And so for these reasons, and so if you do not follow Guru, a superior wisdom, love, and power than yourself, you cannot accomplish that result of the secret mantra. And in particular, the Arhats, the Shravaka, and Pratyabhas, there's a lot of discussion about whether they have abandoned all the afflicted obscurations. But in any case, they're not able to completely extinguish all of the cognitive and cognitive obscurations of the infants. And so because of this reason, they are unable to. And the reason is that they have not gathered the accumulations to purify the three obscurations and their imprints. In order to purify them and their imprints, you need to fully complete the gathering of the accumulations to do this. Now, in order to, if you're going to gather the accumulations, you have to have an individual whom you're going to gather the accumulations in relation to. And if you're a beginner, you can't meet a Buddha as someone to gather for gathering merit, like the field of merit, or someone whom you can gather merit in relation to. And so for that reason, you need to have someone who is equal to the Buddha with whom you can gather the merit. Because you're that object of, or that recipient of the accumulation of merit and purification, you won't be able to gather the accumulations and purify yourself. And so for that reason, you won't be able to achieve the accumulation and purification for great awakening. And so for that reason, there is no one other than the object for accumulating and purification other than the Guru Vajra holder. There's really just no way to do without one. And in this one, because this implicitly teaches that without following a guru, you can't achieve the supreme and common siddhis, and in particular, you cannot achieve the supreme siddhi without following a guru. So that's the main point that he's teaching, right? So this is what is taught in the beginning of the text on the teachings on the prajna and mind indivisible. And so for this reason, as we said, the guru is like the basis of the path. And this is in the teachings on the prajna paramita and the causal vehicle of the prajna paramita. And in the resultant vehicle of the Vajrayana, the Lama is also the basis for accomplishing the path. And if we therefore follow this guru as all the characteristics properly, then they'll bring us benefit. If you don't follow them properly, that won't happen. And we don't need to just mention all of these. As it says in the commentary on the Kala Chakra, the stainless slide, it says the true path arises in true students by the kindness of a true guru who, with love for sentient beings, always strives at virtue for others' sake. And so in this way, gathering the roots of virtue and for learning what one should do and what should reject, it is important to have a guru. It is very important to have a guru. If you do not follow the guru properly, then there are many difficulties that will arise. So for these reasons, if the way you follow the guru is bad, then you'll fall into the Vajra hell, and the reason, or into the incessant hell and so forth. And the reason is that when you disappoint the guru or upset the guru, then you'll fall into the Vajra hell. And if you follow them well, then you develop the prajna that sees the nature of everything as it is, and therefore you achieve the ultimate result. And so it is a critical point that we follow the guru properly. So at this point, the place that we've come to in the section in terms of the outline, according to Tsongkhapa's outline, we are at the point of talking about how to be respectful to the guru. And now this has 8 different points. There are 8 different points here. The first is making offerings, viewing them as a Buddha, fulfilling their instructions, how to treat the gurus and things, being pure in your immediate behavior, particulars of serving with body and speech, abandoning pride, and not acting independently. So there are these 8 parts, and among them today we'll speak about so what we'll speak about today is the first of these, making offerings. So this is making offerings here, and the main point is here, isn't it? Is offering things. And so this first one has 4 different points, but we don't need to go through them all right at the moment. But when you talk about making offerings, and the reason why there's so many different distinctions or different types is because it's related to making offerings to the guru. Now, regarding this, in the Evam Mudra, pointing out the 3 kayas by Miccho Dorje, he wrote in a passage on how one should serve or follow the guru. When it says that when we're following a guru, serving a guru, when we serve the guru and we're making offerings to the guru, serving the guru is not the same as the way the courtiers will serve a king. Because the reason is that courtiers, when they serve a king, and when they make offerings to a king, the main reason why they do this is that they want to have the bounties of this life. It's related to this life. Their aim is for this lifetime, and that is why they flatter the king, and they try to serve and please the king. These days, most countries don't have kings, but there are presidents and ministers, and so you flatter them. And sometimes, like on New Year's or on the birthdays of the president and so forth, you do things to flatter them, and regardless, you make some sort of gains of some extent. And if you don't make an offer to them, when it comes to something that'll help you, then you need to have put some help, but particularly in Asian countries, this is very strong. It's a bit better in the West, but in Asian countries, for example, India and Nepal, even if they're not even a big minister, but even a slower governmental official, you need to treat them well. You need to give them some gifts. This happens, right? And the reason why you have to give that gifts is it comes down to getting some sort of profit in this lifetime. The reason is that you have a hope for a profit in this lifetime. And if you treat the person well normally, then when something happens, then they will help you in return. This is how it works, right? But when we're thinking about the guru or the spiritual friend, then we're serving them. It's not that we serve them or we offer or we follow them in order to do something for this lifetime. It's because we are seeking liberation. It's like each for the sake of achieving the state of Buddhahood. Is to be able to go down a good path in next and in future lifetimes. And it is with thought in mind that we proceed. And so for that reason, the aim for serving the Guru, or the basic attitude, is different. And it was really important that we understand this. Serving the Guru, paying respects to the Guru. Fundamentally, the reason why we have to do this, the aim and the attitude in doing this, is something that we need to understand clearly. Now, when we're serving the Guru, now what all the masters of Tibet have said is that they said, what is the essence of serving the Guru? Most gurus, when they talk about most Tibetan scholars quote Maitreya from his text, The Ornament of the Sutras. And the quote that they give, this is the quotation, serve the spiritual friend with respect, gifts, service, and practice. And this line from the Ornament of the Sutras, where it says, serve the spiritual friend with respect, gift, service, and practice, is also sometimes combined with the teachings from the 50 verses on the Guru. And there's this tradition of doing this. Now, the 8th Karmapa Migyo Dorje wrote about this in his text, the Evam Mudra, on the 3 points, pointing out the 3 kayas. And his student, the second Karma Chunlipa, also wrote in his Chariot of Karma Tsing. And this is quoting someone named Tropolo Tsawa. And what he wrote is taking the Tropolo Tsawa takes the ways to serve a guru that's taught in the Ornament of the Sutras and the ways that are taught in the 50 verses in the Guru, and he combines the two. And when it says in the Migyo Dorje writes in the Avamudra and asks what is the nature of serving the Guru, he first quotes the quotation from the Ornament of Mahayana Sutra saying, serve the spiritual friend with respect, gifts, service, and practice. And he also says that the particular ways in the Tantras, the mantra tradition, are summarized in the 50 verses on the Guru. And you should learn them from that. In particular, the Chariot of the Karma Kamsan says that the citation from the Ornament of the Sutra talks about serving the Guru in terms of gifts, respect, service, and practice. So there are these 4 ways of serving the Guru. You can say that they're the way to follow the Guru, the way to serve the Guru. And so among them, the first of these, there are these 4 points. The first of these is offering with gifts in respect. So gifts, what we mean with gifts is that following the Guru through gifts, if we say it understandably, is making offerings to the Guru. So like offering everything from a katana, or offering fruit, or offering various other things, making a material offering to the Guru. So offering in terms of the Guru is making offerings to the Guru, material offerings to the Guru and so forth. Following them through respect, it means that we're paying respect to the Guru. So we pay respect to the Gurus, and we don't be disrespectful to the Guru. So it's basically how we pay respect to the Guru. So this is primarily what this means, following through respect. Service here means basically attending the Guru. Basically, in terms of the daily lifetime, whether helping the Guru, massaging the Guru, this does happen, right? And so these and other ways of serving are, all these ways of serving the Guru are included in this idea of service. And following the Guru through practice means that we practice ourselves the Dharma, whatever Dharma the Guru teaches. So you don't just leave it as something the Guru taught, but then you actually put it into practice as the Guru tries. It's trying to see if you can do this means following the Guru through practice. Now, so when Kang Lotsa explains this, as quoted in the Chariot of the Karma Kamsan, he combines these 4 points taught in the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras with the 50 verses. And in terms of giving gifts, he says that giving gifts is offering food and clothing and so forth, whatever you have. You see, if you have to have something, if you don't have it, then you can't offer anything. But if you have something, then you make the offering to the Guru as they wish, with enthusiasm. And what it says in the 50 verses in the Guru, as this we'll get to, if the master of your Samaya is to be served with the ungivable, your children, spouse, and even your own life, what need to meet in friendship lies? And so this teaches giving gifts. And then there's also, in terms of how to be respectful. So respect here, as I said before, through practicing respectful behavior, being polite, being respectful, right? And giving up anything that is disrespectful, it's being respectful. And so what it says in the 50 verses is, "Into 3 times with highest face, with mandalas and flowers between your palms, revere the Guru and teacher, and bow your head down to their feet." And so we talked about this one last year, right? Isn't this in other verses? Likewise is also speaking about the faults of being disrespectful. Says, if you would not step over their shadow for fear of the misdeed, would be like smashing a stupa. What need to mention stepping over their shoes, seat, ride, and such? So if you're not allowed to step on the Guru's shadow, then on what to mention stepping on their shoes or seat or ride and so forth, how can we step on those? And so you wouldn't be able to, right? And so this is like speaking about how to be respectful and how to give up disrespect. And then providing service means performing the serving, attending the Guru, whether it is bathing the Guru, massaging the Guru, or it might also be rubbing them with scented oils, drying them, and doing whatever, immediate needs for attending they have. That's basically attending them well. And as it says in the 50 verses, the greatly intelligent obey the Guru's commands with effort, joy, but if unable, explain to them their inability properly. This will be discussed below. And likewise, there will be that says, when you wash their feet and so forth, give them massage and like prosper them before and after, as it says. And so this explains the way to provide the Guru with service. Now, following the Guru, serving the Guru through practice means basically cheerfully fulfilling all the Guru's commands and essentially practicing, listening, contemplating all the meditation of all the Dharma, and practicing the Dharma that the Guru taught. Not just leaving that as something the Guru said, but actually doing listening, contemplation, and meditation as appropriate, as much as you can, and seeing how much you can practice them. And so for that reason, among the three types of offerings we talk about, the best is the offering of practice, the medium is the offering of body and speech, and the last is the material offerings. It's this one teaching, right? And so among these, the best one, the highest one, is the offering of practice. And basically it means that the practicing the Guru, the teachings that the Guru has taught you. And the reason why this is supreme is because a proper Guru is really truly only pleased by the offering of practice, not by the material offerings. The reason is that if you practice the Guru, the Dharma that the Guru taught, then that's what really pleased the Guru. Otherwise, you aren't just going to please the Guru with your material offerings. If you have a Guru who doesn't have the concept, then it's quite possible that they'll be more pleased the more you offer them. But if you have a Guru who has the characteristics, they're primarily, if the Guru practiced the Dharma properly, then that is what really pleases the Guru. There's nothing that God pleases them more. And so this is what is taught in the chariot of the Kamsan. Now it's taught a little bit different in Mikyo Dorje's 100 Short Instructions. Now, what that says there is in general, and so as we said, that the best is the offering of practice. It says that is the best. The offering of practice is best, but it's not necessarily so, because whatever will please the Guru. And so you should actually put the offering that'll please the Guru most is to be the best of the offering. So if there's a lot of work to be done, and offering service is going to be most important, if there's a situation when there are many things that need to be done, if you forget about those and immediately go off to go into some mountain retreat and do practice, but if the Guru likes the offerings of body and speech, the Lama has some work that comes up, and if that task needs to be completed, and the Guru says, then you need to come. You don't have time to do in the retreat. You need to stay and do work. Then immediately, then you leave that retreat. Immediately, then you go and you do whatever it is, the Guru that is it. You can't just say, oh, I'm in retreat, I'm doing practice. I'm doing practice, so I don't have time to do practice. If you just stay there doing that, then the Guru is not going to be pleased. If you just stay there, then practicing, doing meditation practice can't really be the best of offerings. If instead you leave the retreat immediately and go and practice the Guru, that's what you practice and do whatever the Guru asks you to do. That's the most important. And with the material offerings, sometimes the Guru has some sort of a need that they have. If they have some need that needs to be fulfilled, and they say, you need to buy this, and then if you have the skills and you have the resources, then you immediately go and you buy it. You offer to the Guru. But the main thing is pleasing the Guru. That is what should be considered most important. Sometimes if you say that the offering of practice is most important, I'm going to do this. I don't have time to do what they tell me to do. I'm doing this incredible Dharma practice, and you stay there doing it, then there's no way that can be the highest offering. And I think that there's an important point here. So what is taught in so that's basically how the teachings from Maitreya's Ornament of the Sutras and the 50 verses can be combined, taught in general. We'll go into more detail more. Now, as I mentioned before, that the Gandavyuha Sutra teaches about the 21 attitudes for following the Guru. I've mentioned them before, right? Now, of course, the Gandavyuha Sutra teaches 21 attitudes. This is in the Tibetan translation. It says 21. The Chinese only teaches 20, I believe. It's one fewer in the Chinese, I believe. When you talk about the 21 attitudes for following the Guru taught in Gandavyuha, but in 9, when we talk about 9 attitudes for following the Guru, why is that? It's primarily because because in the compendium of the trainings, when it quotes the Gandavyuha Sutra, it talks about it only teaches 9 of the attitudes. It doesn't teach all 21. The compendium of the teachings became one of the 2 texts on top of it. The compendium of the trainings and the way of the Bodhisattva were considered really important. They emphasized the teaching of those. And so I think of this one, I think the 9 attitudes for following the Guru became better known in TED. So that's my suspicion, I think. But the sutra itself teaches 21 attitudes for following the Guru. In any case, these 9 attitudes for following the Guru encapsulate all the main points from the attitudes for serving your friend. In the case, the main point of all of these, according to Lord Tsongkhapa, when we're following a Guru, what motivation you should have, and likewise, how you should think. The main points of all of these are contained within these 9 points. And so I thought I would give an explanation of these 9 attitudes for for following the Guru. So I thought I would explain them or give an introduction to them. And the first of these is, the first attitude for following the Guru is like the attitude of an intelligent child, is entrusting yourself to the Guru. What this means is that you give your control over yourself, you give it to the Guru, and then whatever the Guru tells you to do. It's like you don't do whatever you want, you do whatever, what is it? It's like we speak about so you take the Guru as most important, not yourself, and whatever you give your power to the Guru, and you give the power of yourself to the Guru, like an intelligent child. So an intelligent child here, it seems like a child who knows how to listen to their child. They're intelligent, and they do what their teachers instruct them to do. So this is the way you need to think. The second attitude is the Vajra-like attitude that makes that affection stable and unbreakable and able. So you have the affection, an affection of friendly-minded, and it's so stable that no one can break it up. So no one can destroy it. So no maras, or no matter how anyone harms you, they can't destroy it or break it. It's like a Vajra. It's like a Vajra. And then there's the earth-like attitude of carrying all the burden of the Guru's activities. Like the earth-like attitude, the great earth, right, that we're on, it's like this earth that raises us. We can also be called like that which sustains everyone. So this world is the sustainer of all. There's no one that's not protected by this earth, whether human or animal or whoever. The earth is able to hold everyone up. And so if you're able to take any burden of the Guru's actions, you're able to take it up. That's the type you have, the earth-like attitude of bearing that burden. And next, the fourth is like the attitude like a moderate range that doesn't move no matter what suffering occurs. When you want to fulfill the no matter what difficulties you have in accomplishing the guru's wishes, you don't think to say, I can't do it. Your mind is never affected by that. Your attitude is never shaken by that. It's like a mountain range. We're talking about a mountain range here. We're talking about as in the outer ring of mountains that circles in the earth, as described in the Abhidharma. If we talk about it in the Chinese, it says that the iron mountains, like the iron mountains that surround the earth, according to the Abhidharma. So that's what it should be understood to mean. So it's like it should be understood as the outer ring of the iron mountains that circle the earth, and should be as unshakable as these mountains. Now the fifth is the attitude like a servant that undertakes all unpleasant tasks without any doubts. So no matter what horrible thing you have, unpleasant job you need to do, it's like, it's not that you do the good jobs and not do the unpleasant ones, but no matter what the job, whether it's a good job or a bad job, you do whatever it is, like a servant. And this next one says, the attitude like a sweeper who gives up all pride and arrogance and considers themselves inferior to the guru. So think about a guru, like a janitor, who gives up all pride and arrogance. Think about and they take a humble position and do whatever work. Like who's a janitor who's sweeping up. Because they're always are cleaning and sweeping, they don't have any particular worries about cleaning or sleeping. And so you don't think about you're from a high caste or a high family, or that have these certain qualities. And if you think it is, but if you're made to do some sort of an unpleasant job, then you might think, oh, I'm being made to do this. And so you shouldn't be like that. You should add it where you've given up all pride and arrogance, sort of like a coolie in India, like a laborer in India. And then next is the attitude like a truck or lorries that eagerly carries the heaviest burdens of the gurus, extremely different tasks. So here, a vehicle here means like a wagon or a truck that you can use to carry things back and forth. So you have to have like a truck that can carry things back and forth. And so if you're able to, when you're doing things for the guru, there's some things that you need to be able to bear all those burdens. That is the attitude like a dog who does not get angry even when the guru criticizes or scolds them. Sometimes when you have dogs, if you have dogs who their master gets angry at them, but the dog doesn't get upset about that. So you have a dog-like attitude. And then you need to have the boat-like attitude of never tiring of going back and forth, no matter how much you engage in the guru's activities. So when you're in a boat, no matter how far go across and back, the boat never gets tired, does it? So similar, when you're doing the work, you might have to go back and forth, no matter how much you have to run about. You never get tired of it. So in these ways, these are the 9 attitudes that you should have. And these 9 attitudes, I think, are a really important point. When we're following the guru, the way you think about it, the motivation that you have, or how shall we say it? And so basically it's your attitude. You have to have this sort of an attitude, right? And I think they're a really important point. Some, when they talked about, there's like a comparison there. So there's like a really sharp understanding there. So that's how it is. So maybe I think that's enough for today. That we're just beginning today. I don't need to say too much today, so I think we'll just begin for today. Then next, now one thing I would like to say is that the last few days, there are the Buddhist countries in the Southeast Asia, primarily Myanmar, and primarily in Myanmar, there's a terrible earthquake, and many people have died. And many buildings in the cities were destroyed. And there were a lot of harm to many living beings. It's basically a terrible destruction for everyone. Now, on the news, international reporters don't have much opportunity or much freedom to travel through Myanmar, and so we are unable to know the entire extent of all the difficulties that they face. But if you take a look at it, you think that it must be a terrible situation. I'm sure that a large number of people must have died. Subject like some entire small towns that were entirely destroyed. Because in Burma, it's like the epicenter of the earthquake. And when you go to Thailand and Bangkok, it's like 1,000 kilometers from the epicenter. It's 1,000 kilometers away from the epicenter. But there was a lot of destruction in Bangkok, Thailand, too. There was a 37-story building that collapsed in just a few seconds. And so this is a terrible natural disaster that has occurred. Now, whenever a natural disaster occurs in any part of the world, this is something that we need to make aspirations to offer for those people who have perished in this. And we need to make aspirations for the deceased, and as well as all for the survivors who have been injured. We need to pray that they may swiftly healed of their injuries. This is very important, right? And important, Myanmar and Thailand are important Buddhist countries. And so they're the same as us in being Buddhist, and for this reason, they're like closer to us. And it's different than others, and we have this feeling that's different than others. And so for this reason, so we need to make some time in the next few days for the monasteries to gather together and make some and perform a puja on their behalf. Now, I can't announce the time immediately, but in the next few days, we will make a time and we'll gather together to make offerings and to recite aspirations. So that's enough. So thank you very much. That is enough for today.